Hey, folks out there on the internet. This is David Rovix with another little special edition of Discussions with David. Just been in touch with my friend Max Ventura, a homeopathic medical practitioner and musician in the East Bay, in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, in Berkeley, California, and who is involved with the ongoing struggle around People's Park, among other things, and that has been heating up lately. So I want to get a little lowdown on what's been going on there, and we should be able to see comments. I have to figure all that out, but please leave any if you're watching on either Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, and because I'm using a different platform from the one I'm used to, and maybe I should be able to see comments from any of those three platforms. And then after we do this interview, I'll put it up in podcast form, and you'll be able to find it if you look for This Week with David Rovix wherever you get your podcasts. And here is Max Ventura. Max, hey, and for people out there who may be randomly anywhere and mostly not in California, can we can we start out with a bit of background on People's Park, because it goes back a long way? And I mean, you could start with the original land grant, but I guess the more sort of contemporary stuff goes back to the 60s.
Yeah. So during the 60s, so People's Park is very close to UC Berkeley, just a couple blocks away, and off of Telegraph Avenue, which leads right there to the entrance of UC Berkeley. So in the 60s, there was a load of organizing going on. There was continued civil rights organizing. There was the free speech movement, anti-war movement. And a lot of activists, students, and other community members lived just south side there, south of the campus, in that neighborhood. And this particular block was home to a lot of organizing and organization. So what does UC do? UC comes in and raises this whole block full of housing and says, oh, it's because we need more student housing. We're going to build another dorm there. Well, they never had the money to go through with it anyhow. And of course, we've always assumed that this was just a ploy to raise a power arm against the power movements in place. And so they tore down the housing, bulldozed the housing, and then they fenced it, and it became a mud pit. And then eventually fences were torn down, and then they made a parking lot, and then fences went up again. Eventually, just back and forth, like fences up, fences down. Well, the last couple years, there have always been these rolling waves of provocation by UC, and we've held them off. We're about to celebrate 52 years of holding down the Commons. That'll be April 20th. And so what happened is the neighborhood, neighbors and students came together in '69, just so offended by everything that happened. They said, and on top of it all, you've just left it, a blighted area. So people came together and said, let's build a park. Created a park. It was a beautiful example of user development. Those who wanted to be involved were involved, and talked about what would be good to do here and there and wherever. So the park was born. It became a very special place in the neighborhood, and many trees were planted at that time. There's a forest on one side of the park, and on the other side of the park, all kinds of gardening going on. And then the whole center area traditionally has been just open space. People come and play Frisbee or lie out there. We have concerts. A free speech stage was built for the 10th anniversary. And so we have concerts throughout the year. We'll have all kinds of events. And just over 2 years ago, UC came in, again, middle of the night is what they do, or the extremely early morning hours. They came in and they demolished.
It's 4 or 5 in the morning, right? That's the usual
exactly.
time. Cops around the world,
Yep.
including Berkeley. I've been arrested by cops in Berkeley actually at 5 in the morning.
Yep.
my first arrest in the Provo Park when I was 18.
Yeah. You
But
told me in the
so,
past that that was your first arrest. We were there, we were there
are
exposing
we,
what the city was not doing.
were you
Uh,
there when I was arrested when I was
yeah,
18?
you
I
told
can't
me years
remember.
ago it was your first arrest was, yeah.
Okay. Okay. See, now I'm 53, so whatever I told you years ago, I've already forgotten. So that's a convenient thing about aging. It's like, we can just have this whole conversation over again, and it'll be all new. And I don't even have dementia yet. I can look forward to forgetting lots more later,
Yeah.
probably.
So
But
they,
so they
yeah, they
came
always do their
in the
middle
wee
of the night
hours.
stuff. They came in
Hmm.
the wee hours. They demolished a lot of the East Bay forest, over 40 healthy trees, and it was actually really quite tragic because for many reasons, the trees, the history, the shade, and in our times of environmental degradation, we need every tree we can get. They're sequestering carbon, and in the East Bay, we get, like in the hills, over 10 inches of fog drip has been measured. Uh, and that keeps the soil moist, the grasses moist. So suddenly, the park turned a lot hotter on that side of the park, although a lot of trees are still left. And those trees are not only, some lungs for the neighborhood, but we have red-tailed hawks and Cooper's hawks and the peregrine falcons. A lot of people around the world watch, that have a nest on campus on the Campanile. The people who kind of manage that webcam agree that they expect People's Park as part of the hunting grounds for those falcons. So, this is like in this incredibly dense urban city and very increasingly being densified. We need this open space.
And there's no parks anywhere near there. I mean, of course, I used to live around, in Berkeley, and walked from, Ashby and Shattuck to the university every day. And like the only park you come across in that walk is People's Park. It's just really not a. I mean, lots of green space around the Bay Area, but not in that part
Yeah.
of it.
Right. And UC has always said, oh, we care about the students and about the housing and so on. Well, even the city of Berkeley has sued UC for their lack of, what they've been doing is adding more and more students and not keeping up with building housing. But what they are doing is bit by bit, they're handing over all kinds of contracts to private and public developers, like private public developer situations. So here are
For
some
people who can afford expensive housing.
Exactly. So the deal is not that there's not housing. The deal is that there's a bunch of vacant housing. This is long before COVID. There's a bunch of vacant housing. It's just that it is unaffordable to most people. And you know how developers are handed all this land, they'll develop and they'll sit on it for years and years until the next, the next group of techies or whatever moves in
And that's the story of the university originally too, right? I mean, it was part of the original sort of land grant Homestead Act kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
The whole UC system, I think.
Right, and I think like Berkeley overall used to be in its earlier days, it was quite a conservative city overall, and then the 50s. After the 50s, expression broke out in the 60s. Free expression, that people were just so sick of that whole way of living where people were bound in, and so in Berkeley, people really took to the streets and took to organizing and took to creating community. So community has been built in this park over years. It is much more than the 2.8 acres of land and soil and individual things. It is much greater than the sum of its parts. And you see that, with what's going on now. So it's always been a place where there's a thread of people who've been involved for decades. I've been involved in actually organizing around the park since 85, though I first went in 83. And then we get rounds of students getting more involved. And I'll tell you, when you see down those trees, we did a lot of organizing around that. And then suddenly Capital Strategies, the UC development arm, they said, oh yes, we're going to be building housing in the park, and we need this housing because we care so much about the students. We care. So they did do some open houses. There are these dog and pony shows. The people who are representing the university and capital strategies didn't even know, didn't have the sort of correct history of what had gone on, even just the last, half century. And
Right? Isn't that bizarre? I mean, because you're dealing with people, like, even if they're like really often, I mean, this is just something, a bit of a tangent, but I mean, I noticed this a lot, that you're dealing with people who are like maybe like our age or younger, and even if they're very wealthy and powerful people, I mean, this is how it is, right? The wealthy and powerful people are often, in their 40s, and they were not even born. I mean, I was only born in '67, but having lived around Berkeley and everything, of course, I'm familiar with the history of People's Park. But you can't. This is not a given, and I often hear people making like the most sort of bizarrely sort of egregious errors in basic understanding of recent history, because it's history for them. They didn't live it, and it's kind of abstract, and then the possibilities for misunderstanding the realities of the situation are kind of multiplied at that point, if people don't even know what went on before. You think?
Yeah. I think, like, I see my role now. So now I'm 57. I kind of see my role, if you will, as really working to keep history alive, as well as
Yeah.
inspiring people, saying, user development, the commons, this is pretty foreign in our society now, certainly. And it is to be treasured. And as soon as students learn any of the history, as soon as students set foot in the park, they start to get it. The other day, when we had a rally last Friday afternoon, I went up and I spoke for a minute. I said, hey, raise your hand if you went through, if at one of your orientations you had somebody from UC saying, oh, don't ever set foot in the park. It's a dangerous place. And all the hands shot up.
Wow.
I mean, I think that day we had about maybe 80 people, mostly students there. And really, like, most of the hands went up. So it's a thing we've seen, we've experienced. It's it's meant to keep people out, but they still find their way there, and then they're like, wow, this is pretty nice. Even right now during these times where it has it's an encampment, and there has finally been an agreement. UC has finally agreed that they're not going to boot people out during this pandemic.
Because before the pandemic, it was also a place where folks with nowhere to live would sleep and
but they were very often booted out and harassed. So UC just harasses in a different way now. So the most recent harassment was that Tuesday, not Tuesday, like 3 weeks ago, university came, and UC people showed up at like 5 a.m. that time, and suddenly started erecting fences. And they said they were doing this, and they brought in big, heavy equipment. They said, well, they didn't bring it in that day, but they put up a bunch of fencing, booted people out. People in their tents, like, were rousted at 5 a.m. and told to, get out, move. So they did this, and it was just, a huge offense. But those of us who have been around a long time were like, yeah, news provocation. But what they said they were doing was very interesting. It's all very calculated. They said they were doing this to do seismic testing of the soil. There's actually an environmental impact process going on right now about the plans that they put forth in 2018.
So one way to avoid anybody getting injured from an earthquake on People's Park is just leave it as a park, right? If you don't build anything there, it's not going to collapse. I mean, like, this whole seismic excuse. But the fence, do you think, I mean, they took down the fence, right?
So
because
the fence,
were they afraid people would take it down like they did in the 60s?
Well, what happened is the students did take it down. So we had a rally. We decided, we came together and then had a rally Friday, a week and a half after the fences went up. But in that week and a half, we decided not to try to push things too quickly in a way. In that week and a half, it gave people time to organize. And so there was a very big showing, at least 150 people.
Last month, right? Is that the last month?
This was just in January. So this was about a week and a half ago. So we had a rally and a bunch of people spoke. And then Michael Delacour, who's one of the founders of the park, it was pretty funny. He said something like, he's 83 now. And he said something like, hey, well, why are we here? Are we taking down the fences? We've got the numbers. At which point,
great,
students and other community members just stormed the fences.
Excellent.
Down. But what really was lovely was all the care people took and all the concern for those who are living at the park now.
Oh yeah.
They're really vulnerable, and they were very careful to do it in a way that was not going to injure anybody. And then they made sure to move all the fences so that nobody would get, nobody would trip over them. Then they decided to march all those fences down Telegraph Avenue to campus, and they
Perfect.
deposited them on the administration building Sproul Hall steps.
Perfect.
It was perfect. And then, then they went up and did some other fencing. They're doing active damage in the park. They've brought heavy equipment, boring equipment. They're drilling 50 feet down. We're in the middle of an environmental impact report that has so many facets to it. And this is over a creek. Now, the creek is in like a concrete culvert thing, but there is all this seismic activity in this area. So over so much time, it is likely to have been breached. And so then they're in danger of clogging the creek with clay sediment. So anyhow, it took a while, but to get our longtime attorney supporting the park, he wrote up a cease and desist letter, which just got mailed to the chancellor last night, emailed, and then we delivered a copy in person this morning to California Hall on campus where the chancellor's office is, and posted them all around the park, because UC had planned on, they'd put out the word they were going to put up fencing again on Tuesday and Wednesday. Oh, at some point they put up fencing again. So much has happened so quickly. They put up fencing again and then had it up for a day or two, took it down before last Friday where there was going to be another rally. So I think they didn't want more photo ops, is my theory. And so but then they said they were going to erect more fencing again because they had to do more drilling. And so they said they were going to do it Tuesday, do that work Tuesday and Wednesday this week. Well, not surprisingly, this morning, 5:45, they were back and fencing an area again, and they plan to do more. But so there was another gathering of students. The students are really organizing and ready. The students came out very early this morning. So UC just does its damage. The whole attitude is so sue us, and various groups have been suing over the last decade and a half. Not specifically around People's Park, but around the UC's deforestation and pesticiding in the hills. And People's Park is just a little bit below the hills. So one of the things I've really brought into it, because I've been so involved in that whole work to stop the deforestation of the hills, I've been involved in all these environmental impact report processes. So what I brought to People's Park when those trees were decimated in the park just a couple years ago, I said, I hope we will see this as related to the hills deforestation, as well as just provocation in the park. And I think that message has been coming through. It takes a while sometimes to have people kind of take it all in, but I see that message coming through, that people are seeing it as related.
Isn't
So
there, I mean, you'd probably know, isn't there good generally rules in the city of Berkeley for protection of trees that are pre-existing on property and that sort of thing? I mean, I've heard that. I don't know if that's, I don't know the details, but I know when you walk around North Berkeley, there's so many trees that like on a lot of properties in other states or places, people would have cut them down because they're probably interfering with the basement of the house and their root systems and whatever. But in there's a lot of those trees I've heard they stay up in Berkeley because of good sort of laws to protect them. But do you know about that? Is that true?
it's an interesting question. I actually don't know, which is kind of interesting, but I don't know. But I just had written to our attorney saying, you know, in terms of people's park trees that are left, and a massive eucalyptus just across the street from the park, but very much part of the park feeling, and a huge one in the park, and redwoods and so on. So, is there any, is there a way to protect these remaining trees through some kind of like tree heritage ordinance? So he's looking into that. But isn't it something that we have to do this kind of defense? If there's not a tree ordinance such as you're suggesting there might be in Berkeley, it would be because people love trees so much that they're defending them in other areas. But there has been this terrible movement, a nativist movement that unfortunately, full of xenophobic language, has been in place for several decades. It hit us with Earth First in the 80s, where suddenly people were saying, oh, we got to get rid of all the eucalyptus. It's not native. And nobody seems to know where that statement kind of was originating, but it just got kind of passed around among a lot of us when we were younger. And people just kind of assumed that was a good idea until many of us started to think more deeply, and on a larger level. So UC has been this driving force since the mid 2000s in plans to deforest almost 500,000 healthy trees from the East Bay Hills and pesticide for a minimum of 10 years after each cut. And that is...
Why would they want to do that? Just for housing development, or what are they trying to do with all that land, cutting down that many trees?
There are many theories. One is just the plain old money from
forestry.
Money from selling. No, money from selling chips. I checked with the longshore.
Chips.
Chipped trees. I checked with the
God.
longshore worker in 2015, and I said, "There's all this deforestation UC is doing, and UC is pushing the city of Oakland and all these other agencies that hold any land in the hills." And I said, "Can you check with your longshore, buddies, and see if has there been anything people have noticed different, in recent years?" And he said, oh yeah, they were saying all up and down the West Coast, there are just loads and loads and loads of tree chips going out. And so I'm guessing a lot of that might be for wood pellets being used in Europe and in different parts of the world. But the issue is that there are a lot of contracts. There's the logging contracts and the pesticiding contracts. And when you're talking about 500,000 trees, that's a lot of work. So, a lot of work and a lot of money for some entities. There is no biological reason that this makes sense. And we being East Bay Pesticide Alert and related groups, we've put together different presentations, bringing together like a conservation biologist who wrote a really important book about invasion biology, exposing that that's coming from the pesticide industry. The whole, it's not native, we've got to get rid of it. We've been dealing with that around pesticides, around different insects, and these manufactured crises being created. And then the answer always is
more logging.
First you scare people, and the answer always is you have to get rid of it. These invasive or foreign offenders and pesticides.
Get rid of it with nice local chemicals.
Yeah. So there's not biological. We've brought together biologists. We've brought together fire. We brought in a guy who was a wildfire safety specialist who was hired by. He's a fire person who was hired by the cities of Berkeley and Oakland after the massive fire in 1991 to come in and with a little group of people come in, evaluate the fire, what were the causes and what could be done to avoid another massive fire like this. Like 35 or 36 people died. And they came up with this really important report, which was then promptly ignored. And the report was focusing on the fact that Oakland, this is like happening sort of Berkeley, Oakland, in the hills, like right there from the Berkeley, Oakland sort of center and going out both ways. So we brought him in to do a fire demonstration and to explain fire biology, wildfire biology. And it's very different than fighting structural fires in a, just in a city area.
And he's saying the solution is not more logging and pesticides.
Exactly. He's like, okay, now, wind tunnels are being created. And we've got the Golden Gate winds coming in from the bay and going up toward the hills. And so when you take down these massive trees, you're just creating wind tunnels, which will whip up the fire. So the fire started when there were some sparks that in a trash can that when there was some construction being done on a house in the hills, a fire started. The winds picked up and spread this through grasses. That's where wildfires run, through grasses, right? And sort of took it over. So the fire started, but it was contained pretty quickly. This original little part of the fire was contained pretty quickly. And the problem was that Oakland Fire Department did not follow its own protocol, did not leave people carefully to check, for a long period of time and keep checking. So there were some smoldering embers that then got whipped up the next day when there were some really heavy winds. And that's when the fire took off. But actually, a lot of the old eucalyptus trees created windbreaks and also created fire breaks because they're so excellent at, in Australia, right, there's a lot of hot, dry land. So they've developed to have really huge root systems and to be able to pack in a lot of water and save it and then release it. I always say, like a camel releases from its humps as needed. So soil stays moist around the trees. So a lot of eucalyptus trees were actually the reasons that some structures were saved and probably some lives were saved. But you never hear it from the nativists who are like, we got to get rid of them. They catch fire. And it's like,
they're very beautiful. They smell really good.
Yeah. There's a whole, acclimation of habitat, but also they're so dense. Their wood is so dense. They do not catch fire easily, but it was all the gas tanks and fire and electricity potentially in the hills, especially gas tanks. I was watching hills explode, right. The houses explode in the hills and the trees exploding also. And the trees were being caught on fire by the houses and those explosions of gas lines and car tanks. And we've had to, it's been very difficult to get the truth out, it's much
because the forces that say, oh, just cut down more trees are obviously the ones with lots of money. And then there's the property owners who have their own various agendas, perhaps like with UC that just wants to use this as an excuse to expand their little empire there.
Well,
but,
yeah.
What about with People's Park? One thing that strikes me about the fact that you're talking about students pulling out the fence, students carrying it up Telegraph Avenue to Sproul Plaza, and that imagery is so beautiful to me. But as somebody who's familiar with Berkeley how it is now and how it was, decades ago. The student body is a very different student body than it used to be. And people don't necessarily, most people who are coming to Berkeley are not coming there because it has this cool radical history. They're coming there to get a good engineering degree or whatever. And it's just a different. Who are the students who are doing this?
It's been pretty exciting to see. Over the years, we've had these, like I say, rounds of students get involved, but this year, like a lot of them were saying, "Hey, I came to Berkeley because of its radical history. I put, that was my high priority. I wanted to be here, and I'm so glad to be involved now." That was
cool.
so nice to hear. So I think like maybe things have been so conservative in so many areas for so long that maybe again, this need for expression is breaking out.
Things are changing.
Yeah, and
With the students. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like I actually said to some of them, because I've watched a lot of rounds of burnout too. So I actually was saying to some of them over time, this is so great, and over the last couple of weeks, and I also hope you guys take care not to get burnt out because this is a long-going struggle. This is just this month's version of the struggle. But I think that they've talked about this seismic retrofitting thing because we did such a good job, we being students, People's Park Committee, bringing out a lot of people to those capital strategies, open houses there. Like I said, their dog and pony shows where they were saying, "Oh, look here, isn't this beautiful? Look, we planted a little tree over here." They have their models that show all concrete within a little tiny tree here or there. And so I think we did such a good job at that and getting stuff out in the media in 2019 and 20 with the message, this is not about housing. It has never been about housing. This is about closing down free speech. This is about kicking the most vulnerable in the neck. This is about sanitizing the area for the benefit of parents in the suburbs who want everything to look the same.
Who don't want there to be people with nowhere to live, but they don't want to house them, of course.
Yep.
And they don't want real solutions like involving controlling the cost of rent, which of course is why there's so many people living in the streets. The housing is totally unaffordable.
Yeah. I got the numbers from one of the students for this year who said she's in a dorm room. It was formerly a study lounge in the dorm room, converted to four people's in their beds, and I don't know what space they have exactly, but the study lounges are not large. But they pack them in like sardines, and they are paying $19,000 a year each. And what that includes
to share a room for four students?
Share a room with three other people.
$19,000 a year, and so this is like we're talking about like what is that per month? I mean, you're talking about like 15.
But that doesn't even include winter or their various breaks. So
and who can afford that? I mean, it's just so exploitative. So and then of course it's student loans.
They're being saddled with these horrid student loans. I mean, I even checked it out. I'm like, does this include food or not? She's like, well, it includes like 12 meals a week. So basically 4 days worth. But I can tell you, they don't, there's no organic food to be seen these days. There had been a big movement toward, but what I understand is that there's essentially no organic food. It's just the crappiest of the crappy,
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that, and then they get $300 credit for the on-campus fast food places or whatever. $300 not from a month or a week or whatever, $300 for the whole semester. And those on-campus places are very, very expensive, $12 or something, $12, $13. You'd probably go through $15 once you're or more.
Has there been much I mean, I know that throughout the UC system before the pandemic, there was a lot of sort of labor unrest among grad students, and I wrote a song about it actually called "Spread the Strike." But but is there much unrest among the students? Because I mean, those undergrad students are also so exploited.
Oh, so exploited. I mean, they are the ticket to more money for UC. That's all UC cares about them. But
And
yeah,
so many
there's
of them
more.
are people spending their parents' life savings coming from East Asia, right? I mean,
Yes,
about half of the student body, I think.
it's enormous numbers, and here in an area where where traditionally for a very, very long time there's a large Black population in South Berkeley, and now it is dramatically down. But UC numbers, even though there's still so many, I don't know the numbers of exactly how many, there's still a large Black population, but you wouldn't know it going to UC because I think it's maybe 4%, maybe 4% of the student body is Black, something like that, something just atrocious.
And it's
So,
just such a bizarre juxtaposition with all the supposed concern about racial injustice and police violence and Black Lives Matter and all these people with Black Lives Matter signs in their lawns, and they're living in houses that are not affordable by Black people in this country. The average Black family cannot afford to live in the apartment I'm living in right now, and it just seems like if people aren't involved with housing justice, then they don't really, you know, they don't really think Black Lives Matter too much, because if you can't have affordable housing, you're not going to have a diverse population anywhere,
yeah,
right? I mean, you
right.
just end up
And affordable housing, that phrase gets used all the
real
time.
affordable housing.
Yeah,
I'm not, yeah, and then
that's what
yeah, you're
I
right, of
always am
course,
asking.
yeah.
Talk
Yeah,
about
we
honestly
shouldn't
affordable.
even use the phrase, right? Like real, whatever the phrase is that connotes actual affordability
Yeah,
rather than,
that's what I use. Actual, I use honestly, I use
yeah,
truly, but I'm always talking with other activists about like don't fall into that trap of calling affordable, because what's being called affordable in South Berkeley right now with a new development coming is so the so what's being called moderate income and being called affordable housing is for people with $120,000 a year income.
yeah.
So
And whose idea of that is? I mean, there is these words like median and
yeah,
average, and you can actually look at these things. I mean, what rather than just declaring something out of the hat like 120,000, well, that's then you're getting way up into the top 10% of the of income, I believe.
yeah. So it's like, the Bay Area has been gutted in many ways, by the whole tech industry. As interesting as tech is, and we are using it right now, I get it. But there's been the problem has been all these, from my perspective, we started to get really hit by the very earliest parts of, in the early 90s. And the problem I've seen is that this industry has been completely irresponsible as an industry to surrounding areas. And it's gone and reached out for people and promised these massive incomes, like, so you have all these 20-year-olds who, make $100,000 to $150,000 or more, and so their attitudes tend to be, what I've seen is, these attitudes of, well, hey, go ahead, I don't care, I'll pay $4,000 a month rent,
Right. You can
and
get a job
like
for
not taking
Facebook too.
responsibility for what that means to everybody
Hmm.
else. So we've been living that, and it's been really, yeah, it's been really rotten.
And it creates a lot of division there, doesn't it, in society? Because of course, at the same time as you would wish that people would take more responsibility rather than just forking over $6,000 a month for an apartment, just because they can afford it, But then at the same time, you'd hope that there'd be actual government regulations so that nobody would be able to charge that much
If
in the
there's
first
going to be
place.
government, there's got to be some regulations, exactly. And we're getting essentially nowhere, in the that I can
What
see. Bay
what I
Area.
hear people saying all the time when I'm discussing this in various contexts is when people say, "Oh," when I say, "Well, what we need is real rent control," and people say, "Oh, they have rent control in California. It doesn't work," you know. And then to which I respond, "Well, actually, that's a ridiculous statement. If they had rent control, it would work." By definition, it works. I mean, government passes laws that the price has to be this, and then people obey the law. That's rent control working, which it does in so many different countries all the time, every day. It's just that it's not really. There's so many loopholes with, like, I remember, the landlords could just move in a relative, and then 6 months later they can charge whatever they want. That's a loophole in San Francisco, I recall, that was used by landlords to completely ethnically cleanse the city. I mean, you would talk about the early '90s when I lived in the Western Addition. It was about 98% black, and now it's almost entirely white. And
Yeah.
so that's quite dramatic. I mean, it's like a complete transformation of
So
cities.
yeah. So I think like around People's Park,
Yeah, getting back to that.
we we did such a good job, I believe, by getting out there the message. We've always been getting it out there, but I feel it really kind of resonated. I mean,
As a
with
symbolic.
saying it's not about housing. It's not about housing. The university has its own so-called opportunity sites list of all these places where they could build housing. And guess what they're attacking first? They're
That
attacking
one.
People's Park, Oxford Tract, which is an area on the north side of the campus that is agricultural learning. It's hands-on, and Gill Tract, which is down on San Pablo, a little west, closer to the water. That's where College of Natural Resources has done a lot of its hands-on work with students. And, UC's been trying to gut that. And so their way of gutting the College of Natural Resources most recently was just a couple of years ago to install this guy, David Ackerley, as the new, I guess you call it the president, the head of whatever, that College of Natural Resources. I call him Mr. GMO. His answer for everything is, we just have to do genetically modified, blah, blah, blah. So, he was installed very carefully to try to gut that whole sustainable agriculture learning through UC Berkeley. So, we've been banding together with people from Oxford Tract and the Student Organic Gardening Association there, and people from Gill Tract. And these are the areas where people have had like beautiful open green spaces and have also done a lot of organizing. So that's why they want to shut it down. They want to shut down. People's Park is 2.8 acres.
Yeah,
And
such a little space for them to be so concerned about.
exactly. And they own so much of Berkeley and other areas. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they've got 100 some acres at the Clark Kerr campus where there is student housing. There are dorms there, and there's so much room. And again, it's like, there was some agreement made a lot of, years ago with some of the wealthy neighbors there. It's sort of in the lower hills area. That there'd be no building of anything for, some more decades. And UC hides behind that. And it's like, well, they have no problem trying to take over, People's Park and do all manner of stuff with all kinds of neighbors around there, do all manner of drilling and heavy equipment and, without okay. And I will say that what we were delivering this morning, what was emailed last night by our attorney, is this 8-page letter about why they can't be doing what they're doing. Now, UC always does whatever it wants to do, and the attitude is always, so sue me. So it looks like we're going to be needing to sue. It's a cease and desist letter that goes into detail about why, under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act laws, they can't actually be doing this now, and goes into detail about agreements that were put in place between people from the People's Park Council and and the university all the way back in the 70s.
Great.
And so, we got this letter, we posted it all around the park, delivered it to the chancellors. Some students are planning on delivering it to the chancellor's home. And, but, I don't believe they're going to stop anything right now based on, this legal assessment. They always just
Plow
wait
ahead.
until the full-on lawsuit, and then they try to, basically usurp people's money, snowing under attorneys with, enormous amounts of paperwork. And instead of just doing the right thing, which is hands off, this is this is a park with acclimation, just like biological acclimation of trees and plants and insects. There's acclimation of all the people and the whole park in that neighborhood over more than 50 years. So, hands off, leave it alone. So we kind of we keep plugging along, and we have these wonderful upsurges. Students are organizing to be ready to come out early morning hours the next couple days, and they responded to a text alert sent out by People's Park Committee this morning. So they showed up really early and just kind of held the space. Some fencing went up today. The excuse was that it was pre-fencing for tomorrow, but decided to just, I don't know what's going to happen today, if people will take down those fences too or not, but they might. I mean, there's a lot
That's
of
ridiculous. Coming back with more fences just days after the fences were taken down. I mean, they're going to have to, if they're going to, according to precedent, at least in other situations where, I mean, there's recent precedent in Portland, here in Portland a couple months ago, where fences were put up and promptly taken down and then used as barricades in many different streets in a neighborhood in North Portland where an eviction was successfully prevented. But I think when they fenced in Tompkins Square Park in New York City, I mean, the only way to keep those fences in the ground was to have hundreds of cops there 24/7. So, but of course they're trying to save.
Yeah.
Are they keeping cops there 24/7? Because I mean, they're going to have to do that. Otherwise, I mean, it's just the fence itself doesn't stay up, right? By itself, it doesn't really. Yeah, that's what. But that's which is good. That's a wonderful thing.
And
Max, in your time as an activist, when you were talking to those students and talking about burnout, what I was wondering, just what's the biggest obstacles or problems or challenges for you as an activist over the years?
Well, I think something like this happens and we're reactive. And we come out and we do, and that's really great and it's really needed. But when you're up against a system like UC or any huge corporation, they've got so much money and backing behind them, they can just keep on pounding, right? So it came up with the reason I brought it up recently with some of the students involved here right now is that it's so great you all are coming to the People's Park Committee meetings now. It's great. But at the same time, you guys are doing so much of your own organizing. I'm concerned, that number one, some of you might burn out if you keep coming to our meetings. And what about setting up a system where you have some spokespeople show up, like a spokes council kind of thing, and we keep in all this contact, but you guys can put your energy into organizing, or hey, the schoolwork that, as long as there's students there, they want to, do. So I was just encouraging, and I think that my sense is that was taken well, that people could hear that. And, they are doing such extraordinary organizing among themselves. So, it's really fantastic. So I'm thinking of People's Park Committee, also known as People's Park Council years ago, that we're like a sort of framework for keeping history alive and helping with a bunch of logistics and whatever. And that, this makes an opening for people who are newer to what's going on at the park to, do their organizing and work with us in coalition. And but not get kind of dragged out by endless meetings. Meetings can be, meetings can burn people out. I mean, our meetings are nice, they're whatever, but they're not like, I don't think that having all of them show up to the meetings is going to do them much good. And
sometimes when you're in a meeting and you wonder, as you do, like, okay, out of the 20 or 30 people in this room, quite likely one of them is a cop.
yeah,
And, which one is it? And, you don't want to obviously get too, caught up and getting, paranoid delusions and whatever, but, it's quite likely one of them's a cop. And I've often thought, like, the person who's trying to drag this meeting into a 4-hour meeting is probably the cop in this room. But I mean, of course, I may be wrong. There's all kinds of other reasons why somebody would want to have a 4-hour meeting. But it often seems to me like making the meetings last forever and happen too often is a great strategy for killing
yeah.
a movement.
Right. Yeah. I fully agree. So, yeah, I mean, so far so good. I mean, they were there this morning. They came, did some more fencing of just a little area, saying they're going to be doing some more tomorrow and the next day. But this was, again, like going against what they had said publicly, that they were coming Tuesday and Wednesday. So, jumping the gun, even on their own promises for Tuesday. Now, most of us were not surprised.
That they lied.
Yeah.
And is there much press coming out or anything?
Very little. So I spent a lot of time with a couple reporters. An article just came out in what's called the East Bay Times, which used to be the Oakland Tribune. And the reporter was really nice. It really appreciated, all the information. I sent her a lot, including environmental impact report information and so on. But, ultimately it was done as a sort of another human interest story kind of thing. And it was pushed off last week. She said she wanted to get it into the paper prior to, or the week before last. She said she wanted to get it into the paper, and it didn't hit the paper. She said the editor was taking a long time, and I couldn't help but wondering, well, was UC interfering here too? Because obviously she was, going to be talking with UC people too. Who knows? But there's been a little media, not enough. But I think that's, in the process of shifting, because the students are organizing into different work groups at our rally last Friday. And so they've got a media group and I heard some of them talking today at the park a little bit more about some of their strategies. So I think they're gonna get more media. It might just be that it needs to happen more than anything on things like indie media and, our own movement sources. We're just, we're a thorn in the side of UC, and we continue to be, and we will continue to be. And students will come and go, sort of shifts of students will come and go. But this park is too important to the neighborhood and too important in its history, its anti-war history and free speech history. When UC was shutting down free speech, people then came pouring down to the park, to have a place to organize.
And that mural is amazing. It's still there, right? The mural
that's on the side of Amoeba Records.
Yeah, mural that's just right down next to the park, I guess, on the side of that building, which probably the record store that does not exist anymore, I assume. Does it?
The mural is there. It got redone a couple years ago by Osha Newman, who's one of our wonderful park activists and advocates for those who are houseless and poor, and he's fabulous. So he redid that, and and then there's the mural on the bathroom on the Haste Street side, and that is a mural that I coordinated a lot of years ago. I introduced people at the park to the song by Leon Russellson called "The World Turned Upside Down."
Wonderful song.
Yeah, in fact, we sang it together at Occupy Berkeley. So
I remember that. Yeah.
I started singing that in 1986 out at the park, and it became immediately became a park anthem. And so years upon years ago, people were begging me to put the lyrics up somewhere so they could read them. So um, on the side of a concrete block, on the narrow side of concrete blocks making up an area of by the entrance to the bathrooms, which, by the way, are only around because of activists. I had printed I painted the lyrics. It took all day during one of the anniversaries. Painted the lyrics to this song in little tiny letters, and just painting on these kinds of concrete blocks is pretty difficult. Yeah. But I did that. And then some years later, people were saying, "Oh, you've got to do it again. It's like it's gotten fading." So then I did. So then I worked on doing it again. But I didn't get through the whole thing that day, and so then some people like left up what was not faded, and then some other art kind of went over what was faded. But then after that, at some point there was a little too much graffiti on some of the murals around that building, and so we talked about it and decided, okay, we should do some new murals. And then people were like, a bunch of the park people, the park regulars, who really those lyrics had really hit them, said, you've got to do this. You've got to do a big mural with these lyrics in really big letters so everybody can see it, everybody can read it, And so got together with there was an artist who I had this idea. I wanted to see, I wanted to see people, the diggers, the 1600s coming over the hill and, coming to the commons to take them.
Yeah.
And so this guy said, okay, I can sketch something out. So he sketched out some basics of that idea and sketched out and I said, I want to see the lyrics on banners. People are coming in with banners with the lyrics to the song. And so that got sketched out. And then I worked on painting the banners. And then again, these lyrics, so many lyrics on concrete. But I did another very, very long time period. I think a couple days, one of kind of trying to create the banner itself and the look of parchment, and then I think the next day the lyrics, and then this other park resident who's an artist, he was willing to take over doing the rest, and so he did this beautiful, beautiful mural. And what's been interesting to me is that over all these years, that was at least something like 15 years ago or so. Now, out of all the murals we have, that's one that didn't get much graffiti, except here and there, in among the lyrics. It's like living art. Now and then there's a little thing somebody's, written up there, but nobody's scratched it all out. Nobody's done, there's little bits of tagging, little bits, but mostly it's remained. And it tells me how important that song is to the people, to the people in the park. And
that's so cool.
Yeah. And so long live that mural.
Going to make sure Leon hears about that.
Oh yes, I actually.
Did you?
I actually brought him a copy of our book Still Blooming that features the mural somewhere in there.
Oh, wonderful!
When he was at Down Home Music.
Excellent. Oh, good. I'm glad there was that connection already made. Great.
And then I emailed him, and we had an email back and forth, and he said it was just pretty thrilling. When he came to Berkeley, when he was there, he then, when he was here, I think it was at the Down Home Music, I think it was that tour, he did go down to the park and he saw it, and he said he was so, I don't remember his words exactly, but he was thrilled that,
wonderful.
That
perfect. Really.
So many people.
And Max, what's the name of the committee that you were talking about? The People's Park Committee, is it called?
The People's Park Committee. We've had so many names over the years. People's Park Council was a very early name for the 70s, and then People's Park Defense Committee. It's been all over the place. The thread is a bunch of a bunch of people who've been around over years, and the newer people coming in, and every
You
now and then.
guys, is there a website or anything?
Yeah, peoplespark.org.
Great.
And then for those on Facebook, oh gosh, let me see. It's Save People's Park on Facebook.
Great.
And gosh, Instagram is suddenly ramping up quickly. Somebody started an Instagram page, and I
That
think
makes sense, especially for People's Park. Instagram would be the platform, I guess, these days,
yeah.
because there's
So
a
I
lot
can't
of
remember the
pictures.
exact,
Yeah,
but anyhow,
cool.
maybe it's
But that's
Park.
good. The website, yeah, peoplespark.org, and that'll work.
Yeah,
People can find things.
yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Max. It's been a great pleasure spending the hour with you, and I think other people will enjoy getting caught up on what's going on there as well.
Yeah.
Few
Beautiful
dozens of
living
people
park.
worldwide. Yeah, definitely. A wonderful place, and so much history too. Ongoing. Yeah,
Ongoing,
excellent.
ongoing. Nothing static.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
So
just, we're right
symbolic.
now making plans for our 52nd anniversary, April 20th, which stuff will go up on the website, on the Facebook page, and so on about that. It's either going to be on the 20th itself, which is a weekday. A lot of people like the 420 connection.
Mm-hmm.
But it also might happen. Usually we've done things on Sundays, so it might happen Sunday the 25th. And it'll probably be like last year, like a hybrid thing, like some people live in the park and some people, and then live
Yeah.
stream. So
I
it
remember
works.
playing at one of those anniversaries, but I can't remember when it was. Sometime in the past 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And Michael Delacour was speaking. I specifically remember that because there was somebody really drunk who was getting like looking like he was going to fall on top of Michael, and Michael was like, "Hey, can you back up a bit?" I don't know why. I just remember that particular moment, and it was like, I guess it was maybe that moment I had a little bit of adrenaline. It was because maybe I was going to get involved, and prevent the guy from falling on top of Michael, but there was no need. Yeah. All right. Well, Max, great talking to you. I'll talk to you again sometime, not sometime sooner than 10 years from now. I hope. I think that was the last time I saw you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah. You too. And, boy, our motto is let 1,000 parks bloom. So I hope somebody listening to this and or watching this is inspired to forget about all the damn permits. They're just more excuses to be told no. Just take some land that is not being used well and do something beautiful for the community. Bring in the community and do something beautiful and something needed, and everyone will be better off for it.
Here, here. Yes. 1, 2, 3, many people's parks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to you again, Max.
Okay. Bye.
And thanks everybody for joining in on this little discussion with Max Ventura about recent and less recent developments at People's Park in Berkeley, California. Check out peoplespark.org to get involved if you're in the neighborhood or not. And to hear the podcast version of this discussion, you can look up This Week with David Rovics wherever you get your podcast, or get the David Rovics mobile app, or go to davidrovics.com/thisweek. And I'll be back soon talking to various other people. Bye for now. Remember, mutual aid will get us through. Trust your neighbors.